Thank you so much. Thank you, Sarah. It was so beautiful. And thank you, Sarah, for inviting me to be here. And thanks also to this amazing bookstore. First time here, and they don't really make them like this in New York, where I live. There aren't too many independent bookstores there or anywhere, so this is really amazing. I also wanted to thank One Pause for the ongoing poetry celebration and support, and White Lotus Farms for the cheese, the awesome cheese and bread. So I'm going to be reading from a new manuscript, which is basically a book-length love letter to a person I've never met. His name is Ray Johnson, and he was a collage artist and the father of mail art, or a lot of people call him that. And that's M-A-I-L, art, not the other mail. And he started something called the New York Correspondence School, or that's what he called it. And it was a big network of people that he wrote letters to, and he asked them to write back to him. A lot of times he would send them a collage and say, add to this and send it back to me. And he corresponded with a lot of people that were very famous artists during the later part of the 20th century, and they're still very famous today. And they were his peers. He grew up with them as an artist in New York, but he had a very ambivalent relationship to fame and ambition and the art marketplace. So he would refuse to show his work. He would make it really difficult for collectors to buy his work. He had one show at the Whitney Museum, which was a show of all the things that his friends had sent him in the mail. It was not his work. So he was complicated. And, ultimately he stayed true to the letter as a form of art. And he is my soulmate, and possibly more than that. I feel like there is a merging. Sometimes I am Ray Johnson. And I'm just going to start with an epigraph to the manuscript, which gives you a little taste of the voice of Ray Johnson. And it's a letter. I'll just say that he was born in 1927 and he died in 1995. And this was a letter he wrote on December 30th, 1966. And it's dated, you can see it on the letter. Dear Bill Wilson, I returned home after being by subway and thought and had an idea that a Ray Johnson died and another Ray Johnson is about to begin, and he shall have a new name, and I shall have to be Ray Johnson, but I am this other person. And he signs it, Ray, born December 30th, 1966. Ray was a girl in a famous city. The things she wrote trees wondering, was she even in the city when drafts winnowed trees? But she was. The trees wand or she wavers. The city made her eyes sparse, and the trees shifting responsibility, then still. She wrote to be spoon-fed trees because of ailing from an urban ambition. The reader is sly light drawing branches out of the trunk, growing a world that calls from our death. That future glistens, it listens. The Ray Correspondence School wants to look out a window and see branches talking with branches. Words aren't for books, the trees knew. Words are space debris orbiting the blue. Ray was no girl. Ray was a man with a typewriter and other supplies. Once, Ray wrote to Marion Moore's pie hat of bats until the cloud flew out. Once, Ray wrote to Joseph Cornell's fur box of gems until the ice melted. Once, Ray wrote to de Kooning's wife's shoes to ask what it felt like to be so scuffed following greatness. Once and once and once again, Ray wrote to Ms. Marion Moore. She wrote back to refuse to visit. Once and once and once again, Ray wrote to the Museum of Modern Art, and it never wrote back. Once, Ray wrote to Death, and Death wrote back to say Ray never existed, and Death signed off, "Love, Ray." But Death wasn't done yet. Death swept all Ray's letters together, and the letters let him go. Dear Ray, once I erased too hard and tore, absidarian nerve twisting out of the storm. Snow wasted now, once upon a never melting. After I failed the typing test, I slunk to the city. Typewriter on a plastic crate, mattress on the floor. I wrote letters to myself, and no one wrote back. A person who writes a letter hasn't necessarily wanted to write it. I swept her letters together, then let them go. On a dull day, Ray followed a shimmer to a city ideal. Ray loved the tar. The tar shunned not the light, or dark made sparkles of toxins, path shown to the sun. Who needs trees, except as ladders between this dare and the next? Bundles of rays shone out of Ray's eyes, both male and female, and neither dead nor alive. You cannot know all the rays strive from red to green to elsewhere. On a dull day, a white wall can appear brighter than the sky. And this little piece is a smooshing together of a New York Times article that was written about Ray Johnson's letter art. It was written in the 1960s by a woman named Grace Gluck, and I smushed it together with various people that he corresponded with. Johnson is probably dear Eleanor Anton, best dear known Jackson for his Pollock epistolomania, dear Barnett Newman, and dear obsession that Mark Ripp's Rothko hymn Anywhere, Dear Louise, Dear Louise, from 8 to Bourgeois 10, Dear Agnes Hours a Martin Day. He is founding director of the New York Correspondence School of Art, Dear Composed Chuck of Close, Dear Ellsworth Kelly, several Dear Saul Steinberg, 100 Dear Marion Moore, Dear Whitney friends across the museum country, with whom, Dear Linda, he is in constant pen, and Dear Joseph, Communion Inc., Cornell. Dear recipients of NAM, his June letters, pipe poems, Dear John cartoons, Cage, Dear Christo, Dear Lucy collages, Lippard announcements of Dear Spurious Jim, Dear Art Rosenquist, Jim, Dear shows dine, and other Dear Johnsonia tend to hoard, merce them as Cunningham collectors, Dear Andy items. Johnson in turn treasures Warhol, what Dear Susie, they Gablick, send Dear Grace back. Woo! Thank you. Dear Ray, we are here inside the gray brother, making words with small hammers of metal and ink and a wheel of daisies. Once upon a typewriter. At the beginning, a typewriter was a woman who became our Sisyphus of letters. We can send a phrase slamming into a wall. We are the wallflower. We shy away. Are we stoics or satirics? We recede a little farther and our sister rises from the mist. Drive the carriage back, plated legs kick down, clack. We raise love the letter so small. One symbol can't exist without its kin, and a whole bunch all together makes senses in an envelope for one other to open and read. After we die, who delivers our letters to the mind of each future ray? Farewell, the rays. More of what was said about Ray. Oh no, Ray was not wordy, said Yoko Ono, who re-embers him burning out of snow. Sometimes the phone calls came when you really didn't want one, or having to go to the post office became an obligation, said Chuck Close. Erstwhile person, said Mr. Name. Great artist or great networker, asks something something, who hopes to make a name for herself. Close still expects Ray's long-distance call. Foo is crazy if you are French. Foo is drunk if you are Scottish. Foo is typo if you are you who cared less. Foo, Ray couldn't write to Rauschenberg again. Foo, Ray threw I into antelope, plopped into the Hudson. Ray enveloped, Ray anvil hoped. Ray Johnson smoked his own work with Cy Twombly's cigarette. Ray collected autographs of friends like Chuck Close to store with toilet paper he'd send to Saul LeWitt. He pissed on Robert Motherwell's art news cover, and the yellow, very pretty. Fed up, Ray let all the age out of tiresomeness in an uptown gallery. Andy Warhol. I'm going to skip that. So at a certain point, Ray Johnson left New York and he moved to a place called Locust Valley, which doesn't sound good and did not turn out to be a good thing. He continued his correspondence art from Locust Valley. It was outside of the city, but not too far outside. Locust Valley. Locust Valley of bygone grand. You lure the past. A gust spits a grit of must, disgusting on the tongue. Here reported by ghosts. The heavens make progress while you stand still and well up with locusts. Locust Valley is your incorporeal magnum opus. Locust Valley is the rind of your fungus, no matter you who loathe you who love in Locust Valley. I hear the city trapping, spring-loaded biter, winter ray runs from the city until the Z of the effing alphabet. I dub in the slurp of coves. From the harbor bar to the Barbara bar, he drunk the rhyme. Rhymed, oh Ray, harbinger binging, I corrugate a C and ring it out, thundering. At a certain point, Ray reached past the yard. The first month of the new year, he drove to Orient, discarded Orient, exited the sheltered harbor, a cove. No call, no note. At the 7-Eleven, rested. A little before 7 p.m., he climbed 7 meters above the water and jumped. 2 high tides, 2 ebb tides. The moon regretted. The next day, unambiguous Ray floating on the surface. The police called a Helen, the only local number in his book. A few weeks before, Ray told Helen he wanted to make art with Jackson Pollock's skull. The trees turn their backs on gin-eyed skyscrapers, the spires of empire subdued, the Chrysler discarded chrysalis. Orange boils blue glutted river, while red wings sprout and serrate, steel, glass, concrete, stone. The museums shut their heavy lids. The city could fly blind, but sits lazy on the pyre where we once lived. The brilliant fiery rays depend upon the sun's disappearance. The rays burn their skins off. The rays enforce the onset of night. There's just 2 more. Dear Yester Ray, the truth. We are your mothers who cried when we saw the words you typed under glass at the Museum of Modern Art. The curator polished the vitrines for us, the only ones who came to see. What we had lived our life for was under that rag, we did not say to the curator. We said beautiful and sad with equal emphasis. We let our eyes brim. We stared into the spectacles of the curator and cured him of public engagement, such that he fled. Love, rays of the future. Dear Ray, once the city edited a girl. She existed because the trees filled her eyes in. Stars shot their lights out. Snow raged inside the family chest. These letters don't belong to thinking. The ancient mind grows backward, ripping, snapping. Yes, tines of the other side. The girl is shed from you, Ray, a translucent beam slipping down the night. We search. Holding us, the city dust does. Ray will return to Ray each day. Forever yours, Ray.